is the Lord, the God of hosts, the Lord. In all your little towns there shall be wailing, and in all the streets they shall cry. They shall call the farmers to mourning. I will pass through the midst of you. I take no delight in the noise of your solemn assemblies. Woe to you who desire the day of the Lord. Why would you have the day of the Lord? It is darkness and not light. Is not the day of the Lord darkness and gloom with no brightness in?
Take no delight in the solemn podcast. Rest assured, it's kind of like when you have kids. Like, you don't realize until well after the fact the last time that you did something. At some point, somebody in this last age of man is going to hit stop record for the last time, and then blessedly a trumpet's going to blow, and we won't have to do this anymore. But until then, we're going to keep doing it, because we're gonna pod according to the manner with which we've been podded. That's probably the best way to put that. I think that sounds eloquent enough.
Before you had the idea to start this thing, I don't think I even had a podcast app on my phone. So that's how green I came into it.
Yeah, we shared the story, I think, off show a couple times, but we used a very reputable and certainly secure website called downloadfromyoutube.com to basically download our original episode. So
your laptop still hasn't recovered.
Yeah, it's viruses back and forth, I'm sure. But it just goes to show you that confessional Presbyterianism is so radioactive that not even nefarious malware wants anything to do with it. So
yeah, nobody. We'd be happy for everyone to spy on us, because they'd learn something about the overtures, right? That's what we're going to talk about tonight.
Mm-hmm.
That's the all-important overtures, which is how the big, diverse, cranky PCA communicates with itself. And we send our signals. And someone said that, Twitter's not for debate or discussion. It's a sentiment expression machine. And in some respects, the overtures process has become a sentiment expression medium. But we've got some doozies, and we've got an all-star cast. We have one, what is I like to say, 2/5 of the Presby girls, Zoe, who was busily recording an episode earlier this evening. And how are you, Zoe? A pastor's wife, and I don't know what she does besides that, but she's up in Doug Wilson country. And
yep, beautiful Post Falls, Idaho. It used to be Coeur d'Alene, but we actually moved recently. So I'm in the Coeur d'Alene area, the greater Coeur d'Alene metropolitan area. So
as we like to say, you're perking up the Palouse.
Yes, we're actually slightly north of the Palouse, so perking up the Palouse with the ordinary means of grace is what we do around here at Emmanuel Pres, which is where my husband is the senior pastor. If you don't already know, if you've listened to Presbycast for any amount of time, you're like, what is this chick still doing here? Why are we still listening to her? What does she even do? Well, now it's not the time that I'm going to be answering any of that, but we were busy recording a Presby Girls. We had a guy named Robert Hassler on. He was a great guest, and I think the show topic is going to be, I think it's going to be good. Let me just say that. So, don't know when we're going to release that.
You always think that, and then I listen to it, so.
That is true. That is very true. So we'll find out once you listen to it. But I thought it was good. All the parts where I wasn't talking. So
Okay, so you're our token Presby girl for the show. We also are joined by Joe Crispin. Joe, you've been on the show probably once before at least. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been a couple of times, I think. No,
Okay.
It's hard between all of our private conversations, the ones on Presbycast, to keep an accurate count. But yeah, a couple of times it's been a joy of mine to join you.
And you're our Disney World or Disney you're our Disney World correspondent. You're on vacation.
Yep.
And you're wearing a very vacation-y shirt.
Yeah. I'm wearing the greatest Disney movie of all time, The Emperor's New Groove. I'm wearing my special Roosevelt's branded shirt here because I literally just ran from Magic Kingdom fireworks with my kids to the second floor of this hotel, which is oddly a convention center at a Disney hotel. I don't know what conventions are being held here, but
General Assembly maybe someday.
Yeah,
there you go.
GA's been there. GA has been there before, and that could be the hotel that was used for it. I don't know.
At Disney World?
Yeah. Well, in Orlando, and I'll tell you, the pictures from it are not flattering because people were dressed in ways that was unwise. But that's a normal GA.
Yes.
I can neither confirm nor deny that the Book of Mormon Broadway production has a wonderful song about the city of Orlando. And I can neither recommend nor not recommend that you.
Hold on, I turned
Constitution.
All right, had a little issue with you there, but you're back. So Joe administers an environment far from our other guests. You're in the Chicago area.
Yep. Yeah, I'm Chicagoland area, born and raised. I'm actually pastoring in my hometown of Lombard. So pastor of Redeemer Presbyterian Church there. We launched about a year and a half ago, and the Lord's been good to us. We're just now about to move into a new location, and we've had some young families join in, kind of just slow, steady growth. But we're really loving just having an ordinary means of grace focused church in the western suburbs of Chicago.
So do you find there's less gunfire in Orlando than there is in Chicago? Or maybe you're dodging the bullets both places?
Yeah, I mean, I used to live in the city of Chicago. I pastored there for 5 years, and it's definitely quieter down here for sure. I mean, we're also at Disney World, so insulated, so it's hard to get a real feel of the city. But
all right, well, we're glad that you're with us, and we'll hear from you. And then I don't know, this guy seems, for some reason, he stole the hearts of the PCA General Assembly live stream audience a couple of years ago. Zach Bird from the I don't know which metropolitan statistical area you're a part of, but you tell us where you're from and where you are.
I'm in Raymond, Mississippi, which is about 25 minutes outside of Jackson, where there is lots of gunfire. So,
you ever go there just for the water, just to get some good old clean water?
You know, the water here in Raymond is brown enough as it is. And for some reason, almost everyone here is 90. So the brown water is like the fountain of youth here. So
it's one of those places where you sniff the water before you drink it. See?
Every time.
It was a good week over at the water treatment plant. And yeah. So you've been on with us before, and anyone who's watched GA for the past few years has noticed you and heard you. And they've enjoyed what they've seen and heard. So we appreciate your contribution. And now we have a first-time guest. I think that's right, Justin. Were you on once before?
A couple of years ago.
At GA. Yeah, that all blurs into haze and fog. But you're our only to date, retired fighter pilot ruling elder guest. So we do have a ruling elder. To go with these two pastors and a pastor's wife, because we know she's part of the elite as well.
The secret third office of the PCA.
Yes, the pastor's wife. Mm-hmm. So you muted yourself, Justin. Go ahead and unmute.
I thought this was an intervention with some counseling, but I think it might be a little different.
It could be. But you're from the Presbytery that has sent up 4 overtures recently. Let me just explain for new guests. We always have new people. An overture is a request of a lower court for a higher court to do something. So overtures rightly should originate with local churches and be the court. The local church court is the session, made up of plurality of ruling elders and teaching elders, which we call the pastors. They'll pass a request to amend the Constitution, or for the General Assembly to study something, or make a statement, or investigate something, and then that's what happens. So the session passes this thing. It's usually written in a fairly specific traditional form. It goes to the presbytery. The presbytery will consider it, and then if it passes there, it'll go on up to the Overtures Committee of the General Assembly, and then if they pass it, then it'll come before the Assembly. There are other ways overtures can get there. You can go around. If you fail at the lower court, you can go straight to the General Assembly. It's generally a black eye, and you don't get very far. But last year we had an overture pass that was from an individual teaching elder, not even a session, and definitely not a presbytery. So that's the normal way that things come up. And I guess we've got about as wide a range of requests this year as we've ever had. Already 28 of these things. There are probably at least a half dozen in the pipeline, and we could probably end up with 40 or more before all is said and done. And we talk about them beforehand, so people have an idea of what they're getting into. So, Justin, you're in the Northwest. Now, Justin, one weird thing about Justin is he's Justin with an E, not an I. But E's better than a Y. I'm glad it's not Justin. That'd be suspect.
I think my parents did that to make me who I am today.
It's kind of like the boy named Sue, right? Yeah,
I've been correcting people for 50 some odd years.
Yeah. But you're from the Presbytery, Northwest Georgia, which strangely enough is in Northwest Georgia. But it might not be exactly. It might not cover exactly the area you think. But Northwest Georgia Presbytery has sent these overtures up, and because we've done a show for most of the overtures to date prior to these, and we'll do another one on the latecomers, at least one more. But these have generated a lot of interest, and they've got a lot of current event interest based on things that have happened very recently, and even congruent with things that are happening at the national level in the U.S., in the culture and in politics. So it's worth discussing. So anything else, Justin, you want to say before we get started? All right. Now, Joe, let me add, I didn't warn you about this. Give me your assessment of the state of the PCA right now, the mood, kind of what's on people's minds compared to other years. What do you say about where we are as a denomination, and what do you think the tenor of things are? And you'll have to unmute yourself there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways I could answer that question. I think generally speaking, I'm really optimistic about where the PCA is today in terms of, I think we've had a lot of encouraging momentum for the past 7 or 8 GAs. I feel like there's been a lot of good work that's been done, and a lot of the most consequential overtures that have come through and have been approved have done a lot of good work. But I definitely think there's a desire, and you've seen this with increased ruling elder participation, some of the overtures, the nature of the ones that are coming through, a desire for greater transparency in how our permanent committees operate. We've had lots of headlines for this year already, things that have come up and come out in the public sphere. And you mentioned kind of what's going on in politics and whatnot, kind of the idea of being able to take some accountability for how do things get done, how are decisions made, what happens when mistakes are made. We want to see transparency there. I think one of my biggest desires is to see that, hey, our General Assembly directs and kind of steers the ship of our permanent committees, not the other way around. And so I'd like to see that be kind of an emphasis of this General Assembly. But all in all, I'm optimistic about the PCA. We just need to have some tough conversations, I think, this year.
Yeah, I think maybe the way I would describe the trend in the PCA for the last few years at General Assembly is a reassertion of grassroots review and control. The review and control is a feature, I'll say, of our polity, and it means that everything is under the everything is reviewed by someone, and lower courts do have the right to review what the higher courts, or certainly the agencies and boards that we elect and that work for us, certainly able to do that. Zach, anything you can add to this? As you're probably you look so young. You probably got more experience than you appear to have, but somehow you got that homespun wisdom beyond your years, or at least you seem to.
Well, I still get carded at the liquor store, so
Me too, Zach.
I'm glad we're in the same boat. One of my concerns is Joe is right. We've had some really productive years as a General Assembly, but there's a reason why you don't see many three-peats in the sports world. Is you tend to get complacent and sluggish, and after a while you become about as lost as last year's Easter egg, and you drop the ball. And so I do have a slight concern that maybe there is some sluggishness involved, that maybe that will change as we're getting closer to GA. But I think there's a tendency to get maybe a little too comfortable.
All right. Well, with that, let's start. I don't know that the show will go as long as normal. We're going to look at 3 overtures, but there are other things to talk about, and we might end up doing that. So let me put those on the screen. If you're an audio only viewer, there'll be a link to the overtures page in the show notes, and you'll be able to click there. And as you're listening, if you want, you can look at the overtures just the way our live YouTube and X viewers would do that. So this is the first one, Overture 26. It has something similar has been proposed, or that we've kind of danced around this issue, and it's prompted by the fact that the PCA is, and we've done shows on this, the PCA is nearly alone among confessional Presbyterian and Reformed denominations in not having what we call a binding directory of worship. In other words, we have a few rules about worship, but there's a great deal of freedom, and I think that for that reason, there's a great deal of range of practice and understanding of what worship is and how it ought to be conducted. So there is a desire, there's also a great opposition to this, but there's a desire to have maybe an updated or a binding or maybe less extensive but more powerful in the force of church law. And some people say, well, you're trying to enforce uniformity. And I think that's I don't know that you could enforce uniformity in the PCA any more than you could herd cats. And I'm sure Zach has some Mississippi saying about things like herding cats or whatever. But this is a controversial issue, and some people think, well, I don't think worship's that important. You find out how important it is when you try to change it or enforce something about it or require something, and all of a sudden we find that worship is important to everyone, and this will be a notable and controversial overture. So let's just look at it real quick. Just a reminder, the whereas portions are sort of rhetorical or informative, but they are not the part of an overture, this written document that you're approving. You're approving the therefores. That's what the therefore is there for. It's to tell you what's really going to happen. So Justin, why don't you unmute and tell us about this? I'm sure you know at least you probably know more about it than we do, since you were part of deliberations about concerning it at your presbytery.
Yeah, actually, we didn't have much deliberation about it, but yeah, as you said, I think it's meant to make the directory of public worship binding, and I think that there are a lot of folks, at least within our presbytery. I know I can speak to this personally, having traveled all over the country and I don't, visited 50 or 60 different PCA churches or more, maybe. And, seen purple lights, seen chugging down Diet Mountain Dew in the middle of the worship service and all other sorts of crazy stuff.
Hold on, you just got Resby's attention when you said, was this
PCA
free diet?
seems kind of awesome now.
Yeah, you need to come back. Huh? And I think, as you said, I'm one of the other ruling elders. I'm not one of the teaching elders, but to me, it seems like, the height of our theology would be worship. And if it's not regulated by Scripture, then I'm not sure it's reformed. And so I think this is meant to at least limit some of the chaos that I've seen in PCA.
So you've traveled a lot because of your business and because of your military service.
Yep.
So that would give you about as wide a perspective as anybody would have.
I think we've been a member of, I can't remember if it's 6 or 8 PCA churches, 2 OPC churches, and an EPCEW church, not to be confused with the EPC. Right, although we did visit one of those for a year.
That's the Evangelical Presbyterian Church of England and Wales.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah,
small denomination in England and Wales, and they may have some mainland Europe churches too. I'm not sure about that. So you've seen it all, and you know about the range. So you support this idea that we ought to be united, more united in our understanding and practice of worship than we presently are. So is this to study a new directory, or is this to make the existing directory as is full authority in the church?
I think it's meant to look at it, maybe improve it. I think the intent is to get the ball rolling in this case.
Yeah. So it says this would authorize the moderator of this year's assembly, whoever that will be. It'll be a teaching elder this year, to appoint 7 voting members of this committee, and then they'll conduct their study business. This is one of those committees with a budget. Some smaller committees, there may be an overture coming up concerning a pastoral letter on a certain subject, and it's modest in scope, 2 to 8 to 10 to 12 pages. There's no budget, and it's on a different issue, but there's no budget proposed for this. But there is a $15,000 budget included here, which means you fly people in, you have live meetings, you might even bring in experts of one kind or another, so it requires money. That may be strange to some people, but that's the way we do it. It's become study committees or committees of this sort have become rather grandiose in the PCA. So, Joe, what do you think about this one? You talk about this prospects, but do you favor the? Some people are afraid. They say, "I don't want a committee to come up with a new directory of worship because I don't think I'll like it." But what do you think about that, Pastor Chrisman?
Yeah, so to date thus far, last year we had the discussion around constitutionalizing the chapter I'm preaching, which I viewed as a separate entity from this conversation. We're a denomination of word and sacrament. I just feel like both those chapters should be constitutional. That was a no-brainer. Behind that, though, is this conversation of what do we do with our directory of public worship?
And that one failed, and that was sort of surprising, narrowly, but it did fail, and it would have failed at the presbyteries, we assume.
Right. And I think some of the reason it failed was kind of this argument that comes from some who want to say this is a blatant grab to enforce uniformity on the denomination, which I just don't hear anyone arguing for that. And second, I don't know if it's possible, to your point earlier. And so the question still remains, what are we going to do with our book, with the directory? And I've actually been advocating amongst friends, so I was happy to see this overture, that the way it's going to have to be is you're going to have a study committee of some sort that can do this work, come back to GA and recommend going through section by section to accomplish what we're looking to do. And I think if someone's on the fence or even says, hey, I don't really want to go down this route, the committee, I hope, is going to represent, a couple different perspectives in our denomination, not the extremes. I'm not looking for whoever's chugging the Mountain Dew to be on the committee, but to be able to say, we're not trying to enforce one particular slice of the PCA on the rest, but to say we believe in the regulative principle, and this should be governing our churches so that we can truly recommend any PCA church to a congregant who is traveling and be able to trust that they're going to be able to worship according to their conscience, according to scripture. So I think it's a good overture. I'll be interested to see the discussion around it, because I think it's going to be caricatured in a lot of ways. I think it's also going to be, all the logistical arguments are going to come up. I think all that is going to be real, and we'll just have to see how it goes.
So something to point out in the first therefore part, and this is interesting language, and I think probably Zach can explain why it's there. To form an ad hoc committee to finish the work of revising the directory for the worship of God, not yet given full authority, and it was a lot of people believe it was the intention of the founders to have a finalized constitutional directory of worship, and that didn't happen. The work was never finished. They kind of kicked the can down the road, which I think we've all done that, and we understand the human tendency to avoid hard things, and it would have been hard in 73, 4, 5, as it would be now. But Zach, you want to say anything about the history of the directory and why it's just the chapters on the sacraments and one sentence under marriage are constitutional, but the rest is pious advice. But why are we where we are?
I've been at enough general assemblies where the thoughts and opinions of people who've long since been dead have been evoked. So I try to stray away from what the founding fathers of the PCA would have wanted and focus more on what we need right now. And I bring that up to an issue because I live in Mississippi. This is a Baptist captivity. If you lift up a rock in Mississippi, 5 Baptists scurry, okay?
There's probably a couple of dead ones under there, too.
There could be. And so I've had a flurry of Baptists join the Presbyterian church, which has been very encouraging. But a lot of them travel, their kids are grown, and when they go worship at a PCA church somewhere else, and then they come home and they say, Zach, we just watched a guy chug a Diet Mountain Dew in service. Please explain to us what's going on.
I just want the record to state, no one here actually has a problem with Diet Mountain Dew. It's a refreshing, thirst-quenching beverage that surpasses any known substance in its ability to hydrate and provide a temporary respite from the evils of this world. It's a wonderful thing. We should put it in IVs. We should serve it at hospitals.
If I can steal a line from a great movie, I'm jacked up on Mountain Dew. I could come at you like a spider monkey.
Maha.
I think we can all envision that. Actually, we can imagine that. So we don't just need this, Zach, because our members get really confused when they go to some other part of the country. They just look up the nearest PCA church and they don't recognize what they see there. That's not the only reason. I mean, we want to be faithful, and we want all of our churches to grow in grace and knowledge, and we think a lot of that comes through the way we worship and the content of the worship service and the indefinable here I'll use a vibe, spirit and truth, and it's a certain je ne sais what, as I say. You don't know what it is, but you know it when you see it. So any thoughts on that?
No,
Oh.
I'm still hung up on the Diet Mountain Dew.
I
You're
feel like we need
distracted.
more.
Yeah,
I know what I'm
chugging is
sending.
not
I know what
okay.
I'm sending Presbycast for Christmas this year, and it's going to be a 12-pack of Diet Mountain Dew.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
drink
if
them. Send it to Resby.
It's the best out of a 12 ounce or 20. I don't like the 16s, but it's got to be 12 or 20. The plastic bottles.
Oh no.
I don't buy this hippie mumbo jumbo that soda's the best out of a glass bottle. Like, yeah, I can replicate that very easily. You open any soda, leave it on the counter for an hour, let it get flat, and it tastes just like it's out of a glass bottle.
But in serious, to your point, worship is key to our sanctification. To go back to Justin's comment, it is the apex of our theology. You know, it's not just about uniformity. I want to see my people grow in holiness, and worship is the means through which that happens. So as close as we can be to Scripture, the better it is for their holiness.
So, no, I mean, you're wrong about that. It's really just a way to attract people and make them comfortable, just like in the Old Testament, right?
Yeah, that's why I keep the Diet Mountain Dew on my in the pool, and I blow on it and make music with it, like they did the old moonshine jugs.
Hey, do the purple lights have any effect on the Mountain Dew? That's what I want to know.
So is this? I have to ask about this story. I mean, we can get off track here. We can focus on the most insignificant, goofy thing. Was this congregants drinking Diet Mountain Dew, or was it the pastor drinking it for refreshment, or was it to make a point?
This was a young guy in the middle of the rock band set.
Oh no, okay.
That turned out to be one of the ruling elders.
Oh, well, he got thirsty.
Yeah,
That actually makes it more respectable.
He could have had diabetes, if you know what I mean.
my issue is chugging. I mean, if it were ID, that's another thing.
Well, did later in the service, did the dew bottle also become a spit receptacle? Because that's what you actually have to do.
It's the natural course of nature in the South.
It was the wrong side. It's the wrong part of the country for that. So
it could have been worse. It could have been a Pabst Blue Ribbon. So
come on, Zach. You're just provoking me to.
You keep insulting Resby's culture.
It's been a long time since I've had the Blue Ribbon winner of 1893, but it'll happen.
All right, so back to worship. Zoe, I mean, you're not a pastor, but you've been with your husband in the process of planning a church. He had a pretty solid and defined doctrine of worship, but might it have been helpful to you to have a binding directory of worship? Might have been helpful. Would it be helpful to be able to tell people, every PCA church worships in a good way that makes sense to us? Would that be helpful?
It would be helpful, partially because we have people go visit their kids fairly frequently, or they, kind of the similar problem. Like, I'll echo what some of the other gentlemen here were saying, but they can't just blindly recommend a PCA church to a congregant because there's no guideline that restricts worship in any way. Like, there's no expectation that you can actually have of a PCA church that they'll perform worship faithfully, like, let alone I think some of the issue that people are going to use as bad arguments when we're hearing floor speeches about this overture is you're trying to restrict a certain style of worship on the entire PCA, and style has actually nothing to do with it. It's Reformation style piety. I can't use the word style to explain that, but Presbyterians, we have a different approach to piety itself. And so, we're not suggesting that everyone needs to have a piano to do worship. And that's kind of the argument that I've been hearing being used. But it would be helpful if we could recommend our congregants, yes, this church might have a different style than we do, but they're faithful. Like they worship in a way that they think reverently honors God in the same way that we try to disciple you every Sunday morning, or that my husband tries to disciple a congregant every Sunday morning. And the reality is you just cannot say that in good conscience. Something I think too.
So what you're saying is that the PCA often lacks the consistency and quenchability of an ice cold Diet Mountain Dew, which no matter what time of day or what you've been doing, when you reach for it, you know exactly what you're going to get, and it tastes just as refreshing every time.
I recently watched Idiocracy with my husband, and you remember the guy who says something about Carl's Jr., and he's in the White House, and he's like, yeah, they pay me to say it every time, so why wouldn't I say it? Like, that's giving that vibe, like, does Diet Mountain Dew have your family? Like, blink twice, we will come help you. We can fix this. We have a retired fighter pilot in this chat tonight. Like, I think we can help your family. So just let us know.
I would be so stoked to sell out to Diet Mountain Dew.
Maybe one day you'll get your dream partnership.
just throwing it out there. NSA handlers.
Maybe for those presbyteries that haven't met yet, if there is still time, they can write an overture to change the RAO to add a square where you check off either regulative or non-regulative for your worship. So,
no kidding.
I was waiting for you to say diet or non-diet Mountain Dew, and you really let me down.
And now,
I was thinking
and in proper Kellerism,
it was all teed up.
Now there's Mountain Dew Zero Sugar, so it's just like trying to have both at the same time.
There's nothing more refreshing than question mark. But this isn't, I can't figure out a way to segue this into Diet Mountain Dew as good as Zach. But what I will say is conservatives need to be comfortable. And I mean, if I never hear the word uniformity again employed with regard to worship in the PCA, it'll be too soon, because it's old, it's tired. I'm sick of hearing it, and it's not even true. However, conservatives need to be comfortable saying, yes, there is worship in the PCA that is outside biblical bounds, and we would like to bring a binding directory of worship in to correct some aberrations. And it's like, people are comfortable with the fact that the PCA is grassroots, respect that, love that. However, we kind of are used to having a General Assembly. There is some hierarchy of power, and we're kind of used to either not using it or for it to do nothing. And so, I think it's very important to be frank. Like, yes, I think we would all benefit if there were some things that were normalized, tightened up around here. And again, just don't even engage with people who say it's uniformity. Like, that's just so ridiculous. Like, no one is saying the directory of worship for preaching is a single page long. It's one page. Like, it's not. Anyway, I'm ranting at this point, but I've just heard a lot about this, and I think we need to be comfortable being like, yeah, a lot of people in the PCA don't worship biblically, and we don't think so, and that's why we support this overture. That's why I support it.
Well, I mean, the range is pretty incredible. There are some, I know there are at least a few PCA churches that worship in ways that are almost indistinguishable from any generic megachurch.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't want no range. I just want the range to be a little smaller.
Well, if I could say this, I don't drink Diet Mountain Dew for my health, and I don't worship for entertainment.
Amen.
Well, there you go.
Some things are better for the soul than the body. That's what I'm talking about.
I think nearly every PCA church has a call to worship and a benediction. Now, I've seen the call to worship and the benediction and every other part of the service except the sermon done by someone who's clearly not ordained, because they couldn't have been, given their their chromosomes. They couldn't have been. And so that's an issue too. And that's elder-led worship, I think, is pretty important. And I don't know that this would be addressed in the directory of public worship, but it might be. I think who reads scripture is important, but that's probably not going to be addressed here. But an overture like this first of all, it makes everyone hopefully read the directory for public worship. Some may have not, and it makes us think about this. So it could prompt a good effect, even if it doesn't go anywhere. So there's that. Well, let's look at the next overture, if I can find my way to it. And this is a good thing to argue and fight about. I mean, if worship is as important as salvation doctrine, which is what Calvin said in his little pamphlet, the necessity of reforming the church. If it really is that important, it's worth arguing about and disagreeing about and trying to do better. So let's look at Overture 27. That's let me zoom in a little bit so you can read it. And this one's been called, and I'll let Justin, since it's his presbytery. I don't know if this was evoked in the presbytery, but it's been called Presby Doge, or DOPE, the Department of Presbyterian Efficiency, or COPE. And what did that stand for? The Committee on Presbytery Efficiency. Now we could probably come up with something Pope, but I don't know what that would be. The prerogatives of Presbyterian efficiency or something like that.
There you go.
But Justin, is it just a joke and a meme that this is Presby Doge? For people that 20 years from now that I'm sure are going to be listening to this. Right now in our country, we've got Elon Musk working for the President Donald Trump, and he's trying to slash federal agencies and make them more efficient. I don't know if that's exactly what this overture envisions, but tell us about it, Justin.
Yeah, I think that the author here may have gotten a new nickname, Elon. I won't say who it is, but several of you know him.
Presby Elon.
That's right. But I think
hold on. He only has children by his wife, though. That's important.
Well, that is true.
Let's say there are some differences.
Absolutely. So if for all of those that were at the PCA General Assembly last year, we heard about the tremendous growth of the Presbyterian Church in America. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times when big organizations grow, bureaucracy grows with it. And I think, one of the words that's frequently used in describing the PCA is grassroots, for good reason. And this is an effort to keep the PCA as close to grassroots as possible by giving kind of transparency into the various agencies and the way that they're spending money and what have you, budgeting money.
I'm seeing a very important part of this here. And most of NAPARC is not going to relate. The receipts of all the PCA agencies or, committees or have, there are different, some nuances in the way they're described. But basically we're talking about the Home Mission Board, the Foreign Mission Board, RUF, the college ministry, and then there's also the kind of the funding, financial, insurance agents, Geneva Benefits, and the PCA Foundation. And what am I leaving out? There's something else in there. CDM, basically our publishing arm. But all those taken together take in $200 million. That's a lot of money. And that's why maybe concern is warranted here. So continue, Justin.
Yeah, I think that's it. Just mainly the fact that it's an RAO. It's an RAO change that's suggested here. I think will give it a lot more likelihood it'll pass.
Yeah, that means that it's because it's not part of the form of the book. It's not really part of the Book of Church Order. In that, to amend it, you have to have a majority vote, 2/3 of the presbyteries, and then another approval. change to the RAO, which stands for Rules of Assembly Operations, because all of this is under the assembly. That's why RAO can work. It requires a simple majority to make the change, and it has immediate effect. So that's efficient in and of itself.
Well, and
continue.
The other thing is that it's in line with other overtures that we've passed that are near and dear to me in the last couple of years, which were with regard to statistics and some of our records being made more easily available, public, in a digital format, and so on.
So what would this overture ultimately do? We know it's like Doge in a way, but what would it actually do? Describe its effect to us if passed.
Yeah, so it says, let's see, recommendations for improvement, optimization, greater transparency from the lower courts for all funded General Assembly works, and that all of that information would be collated, evaluated, and reported on a website regularly as soon as the 53rd General Assembly.
So we'd be able to easily see what people were making, where the money's going. Now, one of the things we need to clear up, the PCA doesn't have a big pot of money. A lot of the PCA's employees are sort of self-funding. They raise their own funds. MTW, and maybe to a slightly lesser extent, MNA, the home mission, they're really pass-through organizations for funds to be funneled to missionaries and church planners, and even RUF works that way. But there's still a lot of money that moves through there. And what we do pay largely is the staff of these agencies, the permanent staff, the central staff, the administrative part. So that's one of the things we would see. So we'd be able to. So this is a transparency thing, and the information would then prompt changes in the future, possibly. This wouldn't take money away from anybody. Am I right about that?
Yeah, that's correct. I don't think it would take money away from anyone. I think it would just make it transparent and accessible in terms of information.
All right, so we're going to throw it open to the whole peanut gallery. Any thoughts on this? This is a sort of an information is power sort of thing, and it does sort of correspond to well, we call this it's not going to be leaks. We call it Presby leaks because all this information that's been hard to get to would be right out there, as if some white hat had just opened it all up to us. But thoughts on this, Joe, Zach, anyone else?
Yeah, I think transparency is a good thing. I don't know how you want to fight against this unless there's something to be hid or trying to be protected. I think having our committees work, our budgets, looking at our finances, looking at decision making, be transparent, put in a easily accessible and readable form for the average teaching elder or ruling elder to be able to then deliberate and have conversations about how we're doing things is really helpful. I think, again, I keep coming back to just so many of the overtures that have come up in the past 5 years that have been perhaps the most consequential are the ones that are going after the fact that our GAs, our General Assemblies, are the ones that are to direct our committees. And so there's been pushback and fighting back against this because I think the point's been made. As organizations get larger, bureaucracy grows larger, and those groups tend to like to just kind of do their own thing and just move on. And I'm not trying to call out a particular group, but there's just been so much of our committees and different arms of the PCA in the headlines recently that I think there's a strong desire to see greater transparency and have greater accountability so that the General Assembly can do its work and direct the committees.
All right.
I would second that.
Give us the view from Mississippi on this.
Well, in my opinion, the only two people that hide things are sinners and Santa. So we shouldn't have any problem with transparency. And I don't think it's an intentional. It's just, as Justin said, as the bureaucracy gets bigger, the flow of information gets smaller. and you don't know what you don't know. And so for us to at least have some numbers that we can look at and see and make informed decisions about as an assembly would be beneficial for the whole going forward. And even on a church level, we have a congregational meeting once a year where we pass out a budget. And some of the most helpful conversations we've had is by members that are just asked us questions like, why this and not that? What led to this decision? And giving them their input. We've actually saved a couple $1,000s this year by church members just asking good questions that have more knowledge in areas that we don't have. We could use that as a denomination altogether.
So, I often say that the most underrated of the 5 points is total depravity. If you're going to be a church officer, you really need to understand the doctrine of total depravity so that you are not, and this should be a C.S. Lewis book, surprised by sin, because it happens. But it's not just sin that we're not suspicious of everyone who works for an agency. Our faculties are fallen, and we just have tendencies that everything is messed up, and everything can go wrong. And in the abundance of counselors, there is efficiency. How about that? That's not a verse, but maybe it could have been. And I know at our church, there's a lady who's very good with numbers and money, and she helps our treasurers now. And she's done about as much good as anyone ever has to streamline things, catch things, and just has been very helpful. So in having everyone looking at this, it's a good thing. Most of us have been told, "Oh, just don't worry about it. We got this." But we should know that no one is sufficient to these tasks. So transparency, which is a kind of a buzzword, is in fact a good thing.
Can I voice an unpopular opinion?
Please.
Oh, great. We have an overture. I don't remember the number, but I think it's number 18 that asks RUF to update their campus ministry manual. RUF has done amazing work and has grown exponentially since 1979. But that manual's 18 pages long. Why? They've grown so much. And what happens in lots of our ministries is we grow, but we don't think through some of the actions. And as much as that applies to policy manual, that applies as much to how we spend money. I was talking to a ruling elder a few weeks ago about this, and their church was funding missionaries who had retired, but they'd funded them for years. And it just kind of got lost in the mix of doing everyday church work.
Well, that reminds me of federal Doge, because supposedly they found that there are thousands of people whose listed age is over 115 that are getting benefits from our government. So it happens everywhere, and we shouldn't. There's no magic dust that gets sprinkled on you when you join a church where you don't screw up anymore, or if you're hired by a denomination, you don't suddenly become much better at mathematics and logic than you were before. So that's what this is about.
Brad, you mind if I just make one more comment?
Certainly.
So before I was a fighter pilot, and my dad was a fighter pilot, and he worked at the Pentagon. I got to work at the Pentagon. I say got to work at the Pentagon. I thought it was a great experience. My dad was there, and it was an awful experience for him. But before he went there, someone who ended up being a future chief of staff of the Air Force, who was his mentor at the time, said, 3 things you need to know about working in DC. Number 1, it's all about money. Number 2, don't take it personal, even if it's meant to be personal. And number 3, no matter what they tell you, it's all about money. And
sounds like it's about money.
When I worked at the Pentagon, I was, for folks that have ever had any jobs dealing with the government, and you may have heard things like the color of money and the pots of money. Well, I was the guy who went and scoured the pots of money to take away stuff. So I built appropriations and was a programmer. And the point is, kind of wrapping in several of the comments that have been made, with the multiplicity of elders and wisdom to be able to look and see where we're spending our money, and $200 million is a lot of money. I think that's a benefit to us for the sake of, the honor of Christ's name.
All right. Any other comments on Presby Doge? Zoe, you're a meme lover, so I got to think you at least have a favorite meme about this.
Well, there are several that come to mind, but at the beginning of the last Pacific Northwest Presbyterian meeting, for which I was present, there was a pastor who stood up and made a motion to create the Presbyterian, the Department of Presbyterian Efficiency. So, dope. And the moderator ruled it out of order, and I thought he was just being super uncool about it because that was hilarious. So clearly there are more in the PCA who are thinking along the same lines, whether seriously or unseriously. Well,
the connotations of that four-letter acronym in the Pacific Northwest might be...
they mean a few different things depending on where you're from.
Well, we know where you are. All right, well, let's move on to the next one. And again, it'll take me just a second to get there. There we go. All right. This one is more salty, and we're going to have to talk about some current events to talk about it. And I'll let one of you give the backstory on this one. But this one is definitely, I think if this was a secular news story, they would say this is explosive. And let me just give you the title, which tells about all you need to know. Demand Mission to North America, MNA, our home mission board, to apologize for something and terminate personnel. This could be a first. I don't know that it might even be ruled out of order. I don't know, but it certainly sends a message. So, Justin, do you want to give any backstory on this, or? I haven't. I didn't go back and prepare a dossier on the triggering event, but you can probably explain this to us.
Yeah, so this goes back to, I don't remember what the date was, in the middle of February, I believe, where it was discovered that M&A had posted guidance on their website for how someone who's in the country illegally might evade law enforcement. And there was, I guess, some outrage and response by M&A, and the response was to post on By Faith online a statement expressing, I think, apology and repentance, possibly. But as a guy who has sworn an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to God, when we consider what we say we believe, when we consider, for instance, the confession, which is obviously informed by Scripture, I wish I could say that this was something funny like Mountain Dew. But when, for instance, you're training your children, I've got 3 adult children and 2 that are still in the home. If one of my children sins against someone, I don't tell them simply to make a general apology. I tell them they need to apologize particularly to the particular person that they've sinned against. And that's what our confession says in chapter 15. There are places like, what is it? Is it Matthew 5? You guys can help me out.
Matthew 18?
Well, there's Matthew 18 and Matthew 5, though. Leave your gift at the altar and go be reconciled. And so while there was a general apology and repentance, there was not a specific apology, and And on top of that, when you have when you poke the civil magistrate who has the power of the sword, when you poke them in the nose, then it'd probably be a good idea to get right with them. And so that would be the first part of
so this would be an apology to the federal government, because
that would be the first
now,
point down at the
let's say
bottom.
that this internet posting was done by an M&A employee, not a teaching elder, and a lot of it was copy and paste or linking to sort of activist groups, and it came off as having been put together by an activist, which is, because this is a political issue, since we have a new president and there's a different view of border security and immigration and status. So it's necessarily a political issue, and it came off as very political and taking a side. Of course, I'm sure the people who did it, because they live in the world of refugees and immigrants, they just thought, well, this is just what we should do. This is just, this is our thing. But it didn't hit that way with the members of many of the members and officers of our churches. And I think what you're saying is, if the federal government looked at it, they could fairly and possibly think that we were trying to help people circumvent federal laws and regulations.
Well, I've got a friend who's a federal prosecutor, and he points out to me that for every single statute that's violated, the punishment can be applied for every person that has been helped. So we as a denomination, by way of M&A, have aligned ourselves with organizations like, Antifa, in trying to deter, the U.S. government, and potentially, putting people's lives in jeopardy in terms of, obviously, if you're giving guidance to people who are here illegally to evade, then there's a potential for some type of threatening situation where somebody could get hurt, and we would have that on our hands. But then also, like I said, there's a possibility that someone could end up in prison. On top of that, my federal prosecutor buddy makes the point that there's a theory that's been resurrected, mainly related to this immigration issue, called qui tam, which is a Latin term, where basically, even if the U.S. government failed to prosecute these crimes or potential crimes, that citizens could go after organizations that are promoting such ideas in order to sue them for money. So that would be bad too.
So there's exposure. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, we've put ourselves in jeopardy in some regard.
All right. Well, let's look at we've looked at some of the whereases, but let's look at what is actually requested by the overture. What it, if passed, what it would necessitate. Three things: write and submit a statement to the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Attorney General of the United States, Director of an immigration official, which apologizes for the offense of encouraging illegal immigrants to evade lawful authority. That's the first thing. The second one: write and submit a statement of repentance to the Presbyterian Church in America for permitting to exist within the ranks of M&A an environment among its staff in which a statement of the nature described herein would be released for online distribution, thus dishonoring the name of Christ, bringing shame upon our denomination. Now, not everyone would agree that it did that, but that's why this is notable. And then third, and this is probably the most controversial part because it's sort of unprecedented, terminate the employment of any individual on the M&A staff who participated in any manner in the preparation and release of the online statement, which is a guidance, which counseled undocumented persons on ways to avoid being detained by authorities of the United States government. So that's what it asked the General Assembly to do. Probably seems unlikely that the General Assembly will adopt this as submitted. But again, it's going to make us consider these issues. So anything else you want to say about it, Justin, before we ask the rest of our guests?
Yeah, I just say that I for certain groups of people, to hear that it would be shocking to think that someone might be terminated for a job by doing something like this, that's shocking. If you crash one airplane, you might never fly an airplane again. I'm sure there are things in HR policies, like taking too many pencils away from the office, that might lead to somebody losing their job. Well, if you've committed potentially a felony, then you ought to get fired. I'm not saying it wouldn't be hard and tough, but when you're dealing with these kinds of consequences, and frankly, I've heard arguments about, for instance, Hebrew midwives and civil disobedience and what have you. Well, they're defensively, denying a government who is demanding an illegal, illegitimate act that's in violation of God's law. Whereas in the case of, for instance, hospitality or welcoming a stranger, I'm pretty confident that if your name was Goliath and you showed up at the gates of Jerusalem, you would not have received a warm welcome. You're going to get a welcome according to the state and who they see is fit. And so there's really not much of an argument without superseding laws like honor your father and your mother and the impact that has to authorities and what have you, or the implications, I should say, that it has on our view of authorities. I just think it's very difficult, other than misprioritizing principles from Scripture. I think it's very difficult to make a biblical argument for why violating U.S. law for borders, which every other country in the history of our planet has had, is a hard thing. So that's all I got to say.
Can I just point out that when I come over to some people's houses and they see these guns, they don't let this Goliath in either. So
yeah, you're an imposing individual.
I have to bring a 12-pack of Diet Mountain Dew to get in.
All right. So Justin, the argument against this will be that the people involved meant well.
I often think about, well, I won't say which airline I work for, but, ladies and gentlemen, sit back. Today, I identify myself as a pilot, and I believe that when I push forward on the stick, the nose is going to go up, and when I pull back, the nose is going to go down. Enjoy your flight. I don't think people would accept that. So,
Joe, you're in a city where I'm sure I think there are immigrants, documented and undocumented, all over the country. But you live in a diverse place. What's your view of this immigration thing?
Of the immigration issue, or the overture as it's currently?
Well, the overture, but then you're in a slightly different environment than some of us are.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem going on record and saying I think a nation has to be able to control its borders and have clear-cut policies as to who can come in and on what terms. I just think that's common sense to me. I do appreciate and understand there's a lot of buddies of mine, churches that I know, that are ministering in cases where it really is. There's heartbreaking circumstances. There's unique and rare kind of moments you get yourself into. People who are here in different programs or whatnot. There's all kinds of different avenues this discussion takes. I think very clearly immigration needs to be controlled as a country. I think that's just common sense. I'm happy to see that being taken more seriously in the recent months. But in terms of this particular overture, I think as I look at the therefores, those kind of three consequences or the three actions to be requested, I'll be interested to see how this comes out of the overtures committee. I think it's going to get tweaked and rewrote, and there's going to be all kinds of changes made. I think there's some substance to all three of these that are helpful.
Hey, Joe, just as a twist, by the way, it looks like it's been assigned to M&A, not overtures.
There you go.
Well, that's that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
The routing of overtures at General Assembly is a live issue, and we don't have time to go into that. But let's just say that the routing is important. Where the piece of paper goes makes a big difference, and I'm sure that's true in the Pentagon too, Justin.
Yep, absolutely. So I'll be interested to see how it gets changed. To what degree does this get edited? I mean, for me, as I'm looking at number one, the point A under the therefore of write a formal statement. I think it's been mentioned already, but I think our brother is correct in saying our repentance should be specific. I think it's wise to be able to say, hey, I'm thankful to see that the statement was a statement of actual repentance, of naming it to be sin. I was thankful to see that. I want to take everyone and everything I've heard from M&A at their word. But I think we can go further to say, hey, there's actually someone who is at the other end of this, and actually apologizing to them would be wise. Point B, the idea of the culture of M&A. The explanation given that this was kind of copied and pasted and kind of combined together from other sources, I want to take at their word, but it sounds very sloppy, very incompetent. And it sounds just unlikely that this was just kind of grab bag. We just kind of were pulling from different sources, and this is kind of how I end up. And oops, sorry, but
well, yeah. But the other thing is that, like, even me, like a random person, could read that on his face and think, okay, that kind of sounds like you're encouraging people to evade law enforcement. Any normal person can read that and think, okay, maybe that's not quite legally advisable. So there is something to that. Like, it was probably just, border, like your typical nonprofit screed about whatever social thing they're supposed to be thinking about at the moment. But like, there's just some, like, so clearly some discretion that was lacking in that specific instance. But like, I totally believe that it was probably pulled from some other nonprofit website. That's believable. But what's the issue is like the lack of discretion, which is crazy. But sorry to interrupt, Joe.
That's what I'm trying to get after, is like, at some point, like, the system broke down here. Like, there was a series of decisions that had to be made for this website to be produced by M&A, for this to get on there. And the system broke down where there was not the discretion or the oversight or whatever it may be. And so looking into, okay, we've repented, we've said this, but as a General Assembly, I'd like to hear from our committee, like, how did this actually happen? Like, explain this to us. Walk us through this. How do we make sure it doesn't happen again? Like, that's the kind of thing that I am very much of the mindset. I think a lot of our committees, they're doing really good work. I just want our committees to stay out of the headlines for the reasons they've been in the headlines recently.
It shouldn't be too much to ask, and yet.
I mean, we've got, between M&A, between our denominational blog, like, there are headlines on headlines that have not been attractive, not been helpful for the work of the PCA. And so I would like to see an explanation for that given by M&A, clearly, of something broke down here. How do we make sure it doesn't happen again? And then the point C, in terms of termination, I don't know what this is going to look like in terms of conversations, but the idea of, okay, if someone was acting in a particular way that was, actually trying to promote something, the idea of someone not being allowed to continue on a position isn't crazy to me. But I think it's helpful to actually dig in and have transparency. Again, this is kind of, for me, the main theme of going into this General Assembly is we want transparency and accountability for our committees to the General Assembly. And so hearing M&A address these things specifically, I think is really important.
So one of the things that was said, and this is just sort of pragmatic, and I think this was the main argument and maybe the main thing that the apology that was posted about this issue dealt with, is we had no business giving legal advice. And that's true. That's true enough. But I think many of these things betray a lack of understanding of the nature and mission of the church, and the spiritual nature of the church, and the spiritual nature of the church's mission. The spirituality of the church, that doctrine gets a bad name because it was used by some, to some extent, to justify slavery in the 19th century. But the doctrine itself is absolutely biblical and true, and we hold to it as a denomination, or we should. Our confession does. The catechisms do, I believe, and I think that the BCO does. If you look at the preface and the early pages of the BCO, it's very helpful in that. So if we understand the church has a spiritual mission, and it doesn't have a worldly, social, political mission, then all of a sudden some of these things become clear. But Zach, you're a Southern Presbyterian. What do you think the spirituality of the church has anything to do with this thing?
Well, I think you're on to something. And to tag on what you've said, this shows that we fundamentally, as a denomination, have different views of the mission and the nature of the church. I think this is one of those issues that is showing the cracks in the pavement for us as a denomination.
Well, we want to do everything. We want to do everything.
Yeah.
You know,
and those two things coexist.
There was a very large PCA church, and they've changed a lot of this. But I counted up on their website, and I think they had 125 different ministries. And this is several years ago. And at the bottom of the page that listed all these ministries, which were just the hobbies of one or two people in some cases, there was a form at the bottom and said, if you have an idea for a ministry, fill out this form and send it in. It was so bizarre. I saved it.
Was there a Dr. Pooh, Diet Mountain Dew ministry?
Mr. Pepper.
Oh boy. Yeah, there was an advisory council.
Mr. Pibb is my father. Thank you very much.
To review, store brand and great value sodas and rank them so that you might have more money at the end of the week. But just because it's a good idea, just because I care about it, just because it seems like a good thing, does not mean it's the proper work of the church. That's the bottom line. We have a hard enough time doing the things that we're really supposed to do. This applies to, the mission. I think I can support this. The mission of our agency should not be much different than the mission of our churches. You know, what we're seeking to do as local churches should be very similar to and supported by the agencies of the church. Of course, back to the whole oversight, review, and control grassroots thing, we're controlling those agencies. They're not controlling us. But to Joe's point about publicity and controversy, we're being dragged into these things. It's just like earlier this week when there was an article in the Bible. I did a show about it yesterday, a one-man monologue in my car. Love it or hate it. But when no one got up Tuesday morning or whenever it was and says, man, I want to argue about Karl Barth today in the PCA. But doggone it, our denominational website drug us into that. Nobody wanted that. Nobody asked for it. And I don't think many, if any, PCA churches, well, okay. So M&A said there were churches asking us what to do about immigrants in our church or our neighborhood. So they said that they responded to local church queries. But just because they were asked doesn't mean they should have necessarily given the advice they gave and in the form that they gave it and with the cast that they put on it. But anyway.
And it's easy
Brian,
to
if I
say
could
that.
say-
Oh,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Zach. I was just
No,
thinking
you go ahead, ladies first.
it's easy to say that, you know, someone wanted me to say something, so I should say something. But it seems like good thinking and just being in line with what our denomination is supposed to support, or what we say we support, was really, you know, maybe they had knowledge of this, but it was clearly subjugated for a political aim and distaste for the current administration. That's kind of how it reads to me as a layperson who follows politics like most lay people do. So it's just, not only is it like, it's not in line with the core values where we confessional Presbyterians would describe as the mission of the church, the proper roles that a church administration or a church organization is supposed to be pursuing, but it's also actively ignoring that and pursuing some sort of slight political activism where you can get it in. So it's like, not only is it not the good thing, it's also actively promoting something that's really not good. I don't know. I'm not expressing that thought very well, but
I think some good that could come out of this is we should be cognizant of the challenges that immigrants face, and we shouldn't coddle them and tell them everything will be all right. We should say, well, you know, we're not the government, and we can't help you if there's a legal problem. We're going to support you. We want you to be able to eat. We'll help you figure out what to do. I mean, we had a couple who were here on a temporary work visa, and then they had to go back to their home country for a while. They followed all the rules, and now they've got all the green cards and everything that they need. This is a high-level scientific person, but he's followed all the regulations and jumped through all the hoops, and we never told him, we'll don't follow those rules. We prayed for them. We prayed for the very slow workings of the home government and the U.S. government. We prayed a lot about it. And I think we even kind of, they had a house, and we helped them take care of their house while they were gone. But we didn't help them evade federal officials, and we didn't advise them to. And they're here and happy and legal now. So we should, if an illegal immigrant comes to your church, you need to be honest with them and not give them hope that, okay, well, I'm in a church now, so something has changed. Legally, nothing may have changed. And legally, there's nothing the church can do to make the government give you preferential treatment or let you off the hook or whatever. So, but we need to be on guard about this, because we do have affection for fellow Christians, and we do care about these people, and we could be, our course of action could be warped by our sentiment, but we do live in the real world where there are real laws and real consequences. And I like to say that honesty is the best polity. I think honesty is the best shepherding as well, to be honest with people. Well,
Brad,
we don't want to go ahead, please.
One is, we've had this conversation for the last two GAs that our agencies are committees and not commissions. Item C, I think, is going to test what that means. Do we, as a General Assembly, have the authority to exercise in this way over our committees? And I think that's a question that we need to ask. The other issue is, just call a spade a spade. M&A has been in the headlines a lot. I mean, I'm so far out in the country that if I want to see a Twitter post, Brad has to text it to me, for crying out loud. Okay. And yet,
to your flip phone,
to my flip phone, that's carried by a pigeon, or an African swallow, if you get the reference.
Or a European swallow.
Or a European swallow. That's right. But I get local people in my office asking about M&A, and of all the issues that we could talk about with M&A this year, it's good that we can talk about an issue that is grounded in performance. It's something we can kind of put our finger on instead of a vibe or a feeling or an offense or personal offense. This is a measurable, tangible issue that we can discuss. And I think that's going to be helpful for us as a denomination.
Well, I think our discussion of a mere three overtures tonight is enough to encourage church officers, ruling elders, pastors, to get themselves to General Assembly this year, because there's going to be momentous issues discussed, and this is just three of them, and there's plenty more. There's more to come, more in the pipeline. We're nearing the deadline for one of the things we should, here's a tidbit. If you have an overture that would seek to change the constitution of the PCA, that's the BCO, it's got to be in 60 days before the assembly. But overtures like this, which don't seek to change the Constitution, or that just merely ask for a study committee or something like that, they can come in as late as 30 days before the assembly, which is in late June this year. So there's more to come. Different presbyteries meet at different times, but these things are gonna keep coming in, and they're interesting at least to take the temperature of the denomination. So we'll see. None of these are the end of the world, whether they pass or fail, but they do give us some things to think about and things to consider for sure. So anybody have anything to say that they must say? We we always hear GA. Everything has been said, but not everyone has said it. So does anyone need to say something again that they haven't said before?
Well, I thought we were going to talk about what Bart might have thought about. Yeah.
For the record, he drank Mellow Yellow.
Carl Barn. Okay. So if you don't know what we're talking about, listen to the previous Presbycast, which was me talking about this issue in my car. Sometimes those things are so bad I just don't even post them. But that one was fairly, I think it was fairly rational and cogent. I think it made some sense. And we'll probably hear a little more about that.
Yeah, being well-read is fine, but the incessant need to prove you're a closed-minded fundamentalist will more often than not lead you to post articles about Bart's prayer life. So, just saying.
Yeah, and that's just, I think the rub there was we didn't just go outside of the PCA. We went outside of confessional orthodoxy. We went right to the theologian of the main line, who I need to go back. Sean Morris wrote an article for the Confessional Presbyterian that mentioned what the one thing Machen said about Bart. Now, if Machen had lived into 1950, as he probably should have, he would have had a lot to say about Bart. His colleague Van Til wrote a book against Bartianism, and he called it Christianity and Bartianism, which was meant to evoke Christianity and liberalism. So I think we know what Machen would have thought about it. Let's see. There you go.
There you go.
But it's just we didn't just color outside the lines a little bit with going to Bart. We went to what we left, which is the main line. The church the PCA left was not classical Protestant liberalism. It was Bartianism. With all of its problems, and
Bart is so bad that you don't even have to bring in his personal life, which was also bad, to attack his theology. Like it was that bad. Like that's how bad it was. Our denominational magazine wrote an article about it.
So we want to emphasize the spirituality of the church, but we want to emphasize the reformed nature of our church, the basic reformed doctrine, and if we could just stay within that, we'd probably be okay. All right, Resby, you're not even in the PCA anymore. I'm sure this has all been I'm glad the Mountain Dew talk came up to give you something to sink your not teeth into, because you can't eat Mountain Dew, but to wet your palate. How about that?
Now I'm thinking about freezing it in ice cubes and just chomping on it.
I knew that was going to happen.
I don't know.
But tune in next week for soft drink talk.
Yeah. Could be entertaining. Could not be. Just remember 2 things: you can't spell aspartame without me, and don't be an Erdman.
Woe to you who desire the day of the Lord. Why would you have the day of the Lord? It is darkness and not light. Is not the day of the Lord darkness and gloom with no brightness in? I take no delight in the noise of your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me burnt offerings, I will not accept them, and the peace offerings of your fatted beasts, I will not look upon them. Take away from me the noise of your songs. To the sound of your harps I will not listen. I take no delight in the noise of your solemn assemblies. But let justice roll down and righteousness like ever-flowing streams.
What's wrong with you people?